with Modern Day Apocrypha. Thanks everybody for joining. Today we're talking about social media.
Yeah. Well, before we get into our topic, I think it's a perfect time to say, if you're not following us on social media, why don't you go look us up on MD Apocrypha at pretty much anything. I think it's that way on YouTube. Instagram's probably where we're most active. We got a Facebook page as well. As of today, super exciting, we set up another YouTube channel called MDA Clips. So if you don't want to hear the whole episode and you just want to hear little bite-sized pieces,
Then shame on you.
Well, yes, but we'll still cater to you. So go check them out there.
Yeah, and what's cool about this is that we're going to be able to select the different topics that we discuss throughout the course of our hour and a half long episodes. And perhaps you're not interested in, the broader topic, but we talk about a lot of different micro topics within each of these episodes. So
it's a nice way to say we have a hard time staying on track.
Yeah, I'd say that's very true.
It's all right. It keeps it interesting. It's like mystery podcast. Here's the title, but are they going to talk about it?
Yeah, but we hope that we can maybe not consume so much of your time, but still give you valuable content that you're interested in and you'll find engaging.
Hell yeah.
So go check out Indie Apocrypha Clips on YouTube.
It's MDA Clips.
MDA Clips. Thanks,
Yep.
Tony.
Got you.
You made it today.
Yeah, it's new, but it'll be less new by the time you hear this.
Awesome. Well, Tony had a perfectly well-timed plug for social media. So if we're driving us back onto course here, I think that there's been a lot of focus on social media, particularly in the past, I'd say the past 5 years, there's been a large emphasis on it, but it just seems like the scrutiny is growing and growing. But what's interesting is that it's almost in a juxtaposition to the way that social media itself is growing. So it's like as social media grows in influence, so does the scrutiny and the displeasure. I don't think that's the right word that I'm going for here, but we'll just go with scrutiny. People are really being cautious with it.
I like this quote a lot, and I use it like once a month on this podcast. With great power comes great responsibility. So it's like as that influence grows, that check of responsibility is growing. So, hey, you now have the ability to influence the world. You fucking that up?
Right. And so, Facebook's got over 1 billion users. That's with a B. And so that's like, let's just call it round numbers. Let's say 20% of the world is on Facebook. That's influence like we've never seen before.
Yeah.
And I think therein lies one of the problems. And I hesitate to call it a problem because just as you said, with great power comes great responsibility. And so it depends on social media's approach and how we as the users or consumers of social media use social media. It just has so far-reaching arms.
Yeah, and it's kind of how I've been perceiving a lot of things in my life here lately, is that nothing's necessarily good or bad, but what you do with it can be good or bad or helpful or not helpful. And so I think social media is one of those things that has the potential for extreme good or extreme detriment because of the reach that it has or the influence, power, whatever you want to call it. So not saying that, me personally has access to 20% of the population, but let's say I did. I have the ability to influence in an instant 20% of the population for good or bad, extremes of that, and then somewhere in the middle. And so you have to be so careful when you have that ability. And I think that's why people are they're getting more and more hesitant with social media, because I think it has been this way for a while, but we're just now becoming aware of it. So we've seen stuff with, alleged, I don't want to get too far into this, but alleged stuff saying that elections were manipulated or rigged through Facebook ads and content in 2016 and all sorts of craziness. There's the social dilemma. And again, I don't want to dive too deep into that. A lot of people have already talked about it, but it's if you've not seen it, go check it out. It did a really good job, I think, of how social media is designed to take our time and attention. And so I think with things like that, opening our eyes, going, ooh, now if my time and attention is all being used for good, that's amazing. But typically when it's used for good or something that's beneficial to me, I'm satisfied and I walk away. What the soulless algorithm has realized, oh, the more upset I can make people, or the more I can cause a little bit of anxiety and question and some of these crazy threads that maybe fall into the conspiracy space and they're hard to have actual concrete answers. People just dig and go for crazier stuff because they need that anxiety filled, or they're trying to satisfy it. And it's that lack of satisfaction, or that lack of an answer, that causes people to continue to engage. The more you're engaged, the more ad revenue they can make off of you, because you're there and you'll potentially see more ads. And from a business standpoint, it's fucking brilliant. But from a what it's doing to a human population standpoint, oof, maybe not so much. We're literally causing anxiety in people and monetizing it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to unpack there, and I think I think that opening statement really summarizes the current status of social media and its influence on society. You talked about one thing that I want to touch on, and that is that when people, something good, something positive will leave you feeling satisfied when you're done with it. Mm-hmm. And I think in a way social media can, but it's very short-lived. It's only up until the next moment that you open up that app. And that happens a lot because what are we getting? We're getting push notifications to our phone. So ding, vibration, whatever it is, you're in a meeting, you're out at dinner with people that you really care about, and then all of a sudden you're getting tweets from somebody that you follow, or somebody who's responding to an Instagram conversation, or Facebook telling you about a page that they think that you would like.
Because, Nick, where are you? Nick, you're not giving me attention. Here's something you might like. And at first glance, you think, oh, wow, thanks, Facebook. You really like me. Oh, no, you just want my attention. You're not necessarily serving me. You're trying to take my attention. And then there's no consciousness there to have boundaries and recognize, oh, Nick's out with real people and friends. I can wait. Right. And I think that's the hard part.
And what's really interesting is that they have all the data to know so. Yeah. They know if you're out at dinner. And so maybe that might be one of the secret keys here for a social media platform to respect those boundaries and allow users to toggle notification times on and off. And you can to an extent from the phone itself. iPhones will let you control how notifications are sent now. That's recent as of a year or two ago. And even the social media platforms will allow you to control how those notifications are received and when they get dispatched. But it'd be nice if they had the intelligence to recognize your location data because they already collect it.
Yeah, I know, but that's like fucking scary. Oh, nope. We know where Tony is right now. He's busy. He's recording a podcast. Let's not bother him. That just all the cringe inside of me right now.
I get it, but I would argue that we're already there and well beyond.
You're not wrong, but the moment that they start to address, oh yeah, we know where you are constantly. Oh no, it's just coincidence that you talked about something and never typed it in your phone and now you're seeing ads for it. Like, these phones know and record and all that. So we know all that. We don't want to look at that. We don't want to admit that. And so admitting that from the social media platform level and being very intentional about that to the users, the risk there is, fuck all this. I'm off social media.
Oh, sure. Yeah. It makes no sense, at least in the short term, for a platform to want to do that because they're ultimately going to disengage users. And that's the direct opposite of what they want. And so but I think that it could be necessary for the longevity of social media platforms because everybody's getting aware of these problems. But if anybody's concerned about, how much information they're tracking, you got to go delete it.
Right.
Like, I mean, I don't think that there is a true solution other than delete the platform. And even then, all of your previous data is already stored in there. And you got to throw the whole damn phone away too.
Yeah.
Like, let's just be really blunt about it. That's why Google is in the business of making operating systems for 80% of the world. And I know that sounds crazy, but iPhones are really only leading in market share in the United States. Outside of that, it's Android, and Google's all in the business of selling information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. After, I know we mentioned the Social Dilemma, and after I watched that, I was like, nope, I'm done. So I turned off all the notifications on my phone, specifically on like my social media apps, because to limit the circles. Hey, if you have my phone number, that means I've given it to you. And there's a level of, you're in my circle of trust and you can interrupt my day. And from there, I can still choose when to respond to you, when to answer your phone call, when to all of that. But it's such a smaller pool of people that aren't constantly disrupting me for things that might not be immediately important. And the other thing that I did was I don't put my phone in my bedroom at night anymore, because now I was just laying in my bed, scrolling through my phone, or in the morning I'd wake up and the first thing I'm doing, scrolling through my phone, and the hours of my life I was wasting. I'm so much more productive now. It's great. But then, you know, as we've started this podcast and been intentional about being engaged on social media and trying to grow the influence and audience and put it in front of more people, all my bad habits are back. Like, I'm constantly checking and going, oh man, shit, we're going to talk about this. What's the balance there? Because I think they're powerful tools to engage with people all over the world and build new relationships. But I think we always have to ask, like, this is my dilemma personally, is what's my intention? Am I just trying to get rando people to follow and grow something? Or am I really trying to connect with people and create a service and create engagement and make people's minds expand? And if I am, that doesn't have to happen overnight. I can do it in small sections. And
yeah, so I think that in this opening conversation, we've bashed on social media, and we'll talk about some positives at some point in a few minutes, I'm sure. But when I sat down and just started thinking about, like, if you make a pros and cons list, my pros got 2 bullet points deep.
Oof.
It was, I can promote businesses or services.
Yeah.
We're doing it with this very podcast. We can promote that and try to grow our audience through social media. And for that, it's a very powerful tool. I think that's its best pro.
Mm-hmm.
The second pro that I can come up with is it helps you keep in touch with your family, your friends, your loved ones in general. And I think that's where Facebook kind of started, or maybe even if you back up to MySpace. I mean, it was
MySpace.
Yeah, it's like you create your little profile. You've got the music that you're into. You rank your fucking friends.
You pick your best friends and go, hey, anyone else? Fuck you. And then you're mad at someone and you take them off. And it was this big, like, oh, they took me off their top 8. And so dumb.
Savage.
So high
savage.
School, you know?
It is. But, you know, and then comes along Facebook. And in a way, Facebook was the more mature version of MySpace.
Yeah.
Because it allowed... I can connect with my family that lives out of state, my friends. If you've moved from one state to another, you can see what people are up to, and that's nice.
Wasn't Facebook the first one to introduce like a feed? Whereas MySpace, you had to actually go to someone's MySpace page. It was just like a website within a website. And if nobody went to your page, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
no
it's just
engagement
millions of
happened.
subpages.
Yeah.
I don't know if Facebook was the first.
It's probably the first popular one.
Yeah, they're probably the first that really made it mainstream. I mean, hell, Facebook's paved the way for social media at large, I would say. But before we move on, are there any other pros that you can come up with? I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, I know. I didn't think about this ahead of time, but I think the other pro, and this is probably a pro and a con, maybe together, it allows information to be spread quickly within a network. And so when we had the tornado in Nashville, and a lot of, I mean, for me, I've never had like cable TV, so I don't really get news. So for news articles and stuff like that, I mean, I probably could be more intentional and go look it up myself, but I'm lazy and I don't always pay too much attention about all that. So when other people share it, now it's in my face. And so it's not necessarily just keeping up with what my friends and family are doing. It's now a community communication system. So I think that would be another pro for it.
I think you're spot on. And we actually saw that during the Arab Spring a few years back when, you know, I think his name was Omar Gaddafi was oppressing some of his citizens. People were communicating via social media. You saw similar things happen in Iran, which I don't think was necessarily part of the same Arab Spring movement. But I remember a few years ago, they had shut down the internet because people were able to take a video on your smartphone and upload it immediately in the street. You saw, you know, police aggression or brutality, and we saw that during the riots this past summer.
Yeah.
It's a powerful tool. It allows us to spread that information very quickly. So I think you're absolutely right. That's definitely a third pro. And I will also note that these are consumer-oriented pros. Well, we talked about growing your business, but I think for a lot of us, we're creating personas for ourselves.
Sure.
And in that way, it's you yourself are your own brand.
Yep.
So I think all three of those are very consumer-focused pros. And so if you spend some time thinking about, like, if you're a business, beyond just trying to promote and grow your audience, you might have other information, like social media collects data that you could use to drive well-timed interactions to your customers.
Well, even thinking about the growing your audience, like let's dive deeper in there for a minute. Before social media, you just had a website, but you had no way to drive to it. You know, you had to do all of your own either paid ads through Google.
It was like email campaigns and ads.
Email campaigns, but again, then you're still needing to get those email addresses. And I mean, we still deal with this today. It's all the spam. People don't convert very well on it unless you've built an audience and it's a captive email list that you've built, but that takes time to build. And sure, someone can forward it to their list of email stuff, but that was not as common to convert so quickly. And so I think another pro in that building a business is it allows you quicker access to market share. So if you build yourself value and you get somebody with potential influence to share it, or the potential virality of things, wow, this was a really good story, ad, whatever, boom, and there's 1,000 shares on it, and overnight your page goes from, 60 of your friends and family who feel bad for you and clicked like to 100,000 people following and paying attention to you. And now that's not everyone's story, but prior to social media, that wasn't even a potential. And that can be good or bad, right? If we have bullshit that goes viral, because typically that's what goes viral, but there is that potential for good and a quicker business build. Prior to the internet, man, you tried to build a business, you better have enough cash in your pocket for 5 years, because otherwise you were fucked. There was no potential.
Yeah, you got to go build proper business cases, get investors on board if it's something major, or like you said, have it self-funded and have the cash.
Yeah.
So the unfortunate side of this conversation is that I think that's where the conversation ends. And those are all very powerful pros.
Yep.
So I don't want to convey this idea that the longer the list, the better.
No.
These are very powerful pros. And, if you're, I think drawing light to the movements like we discussed is very powerful. It helps us feel more secure and safe that we're protected just by holding up a phone at somebody. That's a form of self-defense in a way.
Well, and I think that's why people are there, because people don't show up for bad shit. Hey, there's actual value in here. And even, we're about to get into the stuff that is maybe negative or problems we need to solve for in some way or another. It's not all bad, even though there's quite the list of things that we need to solve for.
Yeah. So on the bad side of things, I instead of just trying to go through a list, let's talk about something that you've already brought up, and that is addiction to social media.
Yeah.
And you've already alluded to the social dilemma, and I've watched probably about 80% of it. So I haven't seen the ending or the closing thoughts, but my takeaway from that was they do a really good job of painting the picture of the psychology involved in how these platforms intentionally try to get you addicted to your social media accounts.
Right.
And it's really interesting. And I'm if you're interested more in this, watch The Social Dilemma. I think it's a good watch, but I think keep in mind the biases because they definitely
Well, you didn't
make a
finish
case.
it. On the back end, they were like, hey, we're not saying delete it now and be done with it. We're saying be aware and let's solve for this shit.
And I think that's very appropriate. I think that's right where it needs to be. But the fact of the matter is that thousands or millions of us are addicted to social media. I mean, right before we started the recording, Tony and I were talking a little bit, and I told him I don't know how much time I spent on Instagram, but goodness gracious, this past summer, I'd spend 3 hours throughout the day scrolling through different feeds and sending memes to my friends, and I
remember receiving those memes.
yeah, and it's good fun, but what I started to feel was that it was nothing more than just entertainment. And sure, it was the grounds for having conversation with my friends, but quite often it was double tap heart. And there's no engagement from the other person. And that's fine because like you're just having that little meme conversation back and forth. It's good fun. It's funny. You can make jokes about it later on down the road. But to your point, Tony, it's very shallow interaction and it doesn't forge a strong relationship. It just makes you aware that somebody was thinking about you.
Yeah, which if you want to be intentional about letting someone know you're thinking about them, whether you use a social media platform or a text message or a quick phone call, hey, was thinking about you, hope you're having a great day. That hits home so much harder than a meme that says that, but you have to dig through and hope that's what they meant.
Yeah, and well, what we're doing on social media is we're sharing other people's content.
Yep.
And it's not my ideas. It's not my content. I didn't put in the effort other than being just like everybody else and flicking that thumb up about 10,000 times a day and saying, these are my top 6 that I found today.
Yep.
Here you go. And it's real. Like if you look at some of the numbers, the depression rates, if you compare people who are using social media to people who are not, the depression rates are, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me right now, but they're significantly higher. And I think that's because as human beings, we've evolved to need that. We're making eye contact right now. There's so much power in that. Tony and I have been researching YouTube thumbnails, and one of the keys there is for thumbnails to really grab attention, you look directly at the camera because your audience is going to look into the eyes of whatever's in that image.
Right.
And you don't get that. There's no humanized interaction through social media. And so I think that's where you're starting to see some of these depression rates. And we can talk about, the personas that people make of themselves in a minute, but I'll shut up and let you chime in. I've talked a lot.
No, it's okay, man. You're saying a lot of good shit. So that's why I'm like, no, I don't have to add to it. But
it's you can go so many different directions with the social media conversation.
Yeah, that just talking a little bit more about that connection piece. I think that's what's been so hard during this pandemic is you can hop on a video call and look at somebody, but it's not the same. There's something in our biology, and whether, I'm probably going to lean towards an assumption of it being like an energy field, something where you actually can sense and feel someone else's energy. And there's something in our biology that's wired to want or need that. And if you think of it from a primal standpoint, it probably makes sense because we're going to get some type of a chemical dopamine trigger that, nope, I'm more protected in a pack of people, or at least community, something that just makes sense. And so when we're so separated, and then we have these tools like social media that allow us to get the checkbox of community or the checkbox of social interaction without the physical, biological need of like looking in someone's eyes or, touch, being physically, present, shaking hands, giving a hug, whatever you need. that meter slowly starts to go down, and then you're, feeling depressed because it's not ever going back up. And so I think early on, I don't think anyone designed social media to go, ooh, let's depress the population. Fuck that noise. But I mean, it's a result. And like you said, you can look it up and see there's tons of studies on it. And so how do we solve that? Because again, I don't think we need to, social media is bad, burn it to the ground. No, let's be aware of it. And how do we fix the problems it's caused?
Right. And so on that note, where do you think the responsibility lies? Do you think the responsibility lies on the social media platforms itself? Do you think it lies on the government to regulate it? Do you think it lies on us to take self-responsibility?
I would say yes. Because I don't think...
To all?
Yeah.
I agree.
And I don't think... I mean, and that's kind of just my take on everything. For you to push off responsibility and be like, oh, that's not mine. And yes, there's times it's someone else's responsibility to take care of whatever. But this is such a big issue that affects so many people, and that so many people have a place to own it, that I think it's really up to everyone involved. And I know it's good to have government kind of mandate things, but sometimes that gets weird. Because when you try to mandate morality, it doesn't always work. And sometimes you get the inverse of it.
Yeah, it's kind of like the butterfly effect when it comes to government regulations. I think we've talked about this example on one of the previous episodes, but like in California, they tried passing a law where the Uber and Lyft drivers who are contractors, they're not full-time employees, they passed a law where they would have to be paid a certain amount of wages and get medical benefits, and all of that's good for the drivers, and I want them to get that.
Right.
But the reality was that Uber and Lyft literally couldn't afford to do that. Like, it just wasn't feasible unless they want to, double their rates or whatever, and
then the user's not going to use it.
And maybe the rest of us would be okay paying twice as much. I don't know. I think probably not. But they ended up pulling out of California, or threatening to. They started to, and then California reversed the bill. And so that's where, like, unintended consequences happen. People in California would no longer be able to use these services, and they were upset. So, like, we have to approach these very cautiously.
I agree.
But I think that we can get into some of the government regulations. I've got a question for us towards the end, and this may be a response to some of that.
Okay.
But I agree with you that I think us as individuals have to take responsibility first and foremost. And it's like we need AA for social media. Like, it's serious. Like,
yeah.
I right before we started pushing and promoting our podcast, I had just removed all social media. And I'll tell you what, that was a nice 2 weeks. It really was. It was peaceful.
Yep.
And people who actually wanted to engaged with me, and vice versa.
Well, you realize who your friends are, and it's not that you're not friends, but I think we don't do a good job in our culture. At least I don't personally, and I don't know anyone who does this, do a good job of differentiating between friends and acquaintances. Because, and it's like the social media platforms convince us that these are friends because, add friend.
Right. And what it does in my mind is it puts a list of quote unquote friends, or let's just call them contacts, on the front page. So the people who are most active are the ones that you engage with the most. Remove that and then see who engages with you.
Yep.
And that's how you identify who's thinking about you when you're not always in front of their face.
Well, and that goes back to that meaningful community engagement type thing, because yes, there's probably work you have to do in relationship, and I'm not trying to avoid that, but when you don't have to work so damn hard to get love or attention, oh wow, maybe I'll actually believe I'm worth it. But when you have these social media platforms, and then we're wired, and it's the same part of the brain that goes, oh, people love me, people appreciate me, I need to keep doing this. And so you're working overtime to put out content or share someone else's content and be engaged so you can get that appreciation checkbox in your mind. more than any other time in history, we're working so damn hard. And guess what? Depression rates follow that. And I don't think we were designed biologically to have to do all that.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. And so when you look at the biological structures, the way that our minds operate, we get dopamine hits for the things that are biologically necessary to sustain life. And I use that loosely because like sex engages in dopamine, or it releases dopamine. And that's not necessary for life, but
it's necessary for
it is.
life to continue.
Right. And so it's very interesting that our bodies have evolved naturally to encourage us through the use of hormones to do the things that we need to do in order to survive. And for humans, a lot of that is social interactions. So those constant checks to revisit your post, you know, if I post something, it's like in the next hour, I'm going to go back to it 5 times.
Guilty. And then if you're not paying attention and you don't realize that, you know, as I've been, you know, working to grow my own personal brand and then the brand for the podcast, I've got a couple of really cool tools that help me see, based on last week's activity of the people on my page, when the best time to post is. And so if you're not aware of any of that stuff, and then you post something maybe at a way off time for the day and you don't know because that just happens to be the time you post, and there's like no engagement with it, oh, fuck, people hate me.
Yeah. And that's interesting. I had no idea about that. Like on the marketing side of things, it makes sense because there are specific ideal times to target people with an email campaign, for example. Like early in the mornings on Tuesdays tend to be the best times. Because on Mondays, everybody's checking their email from Friday afternoon. They got emails over the weekend. And so your email just gets drowned out amongst all the other noise.
Makes a lot of sense.
So Tuesday mornings, people are waking up to a clean inbox. It's still at the beginning of the week, so people are focused and not thinking about the weekend. So it just makes sense. But it's interesting that we attach so much of our perceived value of ourselves, our self-value, to these personas that we're creating on social media. And so if you're, just like you said, if you don't get enough likes, you start thinking about yourself, or is it the content that I posted that people aren't liking? Is it me? Is it my page? Was it a post that I had last week that might have offended people?
When you get a post that maybe you got posted at the very right time and it's the perfect picture and message that really resonates with your audience, and it just fucking goes off the charts, and you get all these comments, all these likes, and it really in your mind goes, this is normal.
It blows things out of proportions.
And then the next one comes in and it goes back to what your true normal is at maybe half or less than half of that. And then you go, why does everyone hate me today? They loved me yesterday. And these might not be actual thoughts. They might be, but subconsciously that's what's going on, and that's how we're reacting.
Absolutely. And what's interesting about social media is that that same concept can apply to our podcast if I extrapolate it out, because there are things that I've said on this podcast that I'm like, I second guess it. I'm like, well, maybe I shouldn't have said that. But the reality is that I'm not perfect and I make mistakes. And sometimes I say things that haven't been filtered as much as I would have liked for them to, but it's very raw and it's genuine.
Makes one of us. I always come off perfect.
Well, I know that. That's why I enjoy doing this with you. But on social media, you have so much more control over that. I mean, in theory, we can go back and edit out the things that we don't like that we've said on air.
That's a lot of work, and I ain't about that.
Well, honestly, I'd rather just be our true selves. And I think at its core, we've talked about this before, but having this podcast allows us to grow ourselves, because putting our ideas out there, opening our dumb mouths, my dumb mouth, let me speak for myself.
It's our dumb mouths.
Is a growing opportunity.
Yeah.
And so on social media, everybody's aware of this. Every person I follow is hilarious. Every person I follow is on vacation. Every person that I follow has a great relationship. Life is peachy on social media.
It's so unreal, but it's because that's what people want to go see. People want to go escape whatever it is in their life and go, well, let me go see what might inspire me. And that's probably the intention. But then the reality is you go look and go, wow, they always have it together. I'm a piece of shit.
I'm not even sure I'd go that far to say that that's the intention. I think a lot of times it's the intention to inspire your audience.
Well, I mean, I'm talking as a consumer.
Oh, I see.
When I go look, I want to go be inspired. And sometimes I am, but then I go look at, whoever I'm following that I love. And I'm like, damn, maybe one day I'll be at that spot where I have it all together.
Yeah, what it's done is it's taken that same concept of keeping up with the Joneses and expanded it to not your 4 neighbors, but to the whole
goddamn
world.
And it's not, oh, shit, it's this quarter or this year and the neighbor got a new car and they need to keep up with it. It's this minute, this person did this. This minute, this person's in Fiji. This minute, this person got a new car. This minute, this person got a promotion. This minute, this person launched a new video that got 1 million views. And you're going, how in the world could I ever be anything?
Yeah, we force ourselves to, I shouldn't say we force ourselves to, but we compare ourselves to so many people. It just happens naturally, and social media exacerbates that.
For sure.
And then, so there's a YouTube channel called Charisma on Command. And I like them a lot, first of all, so that'll just be a little plug for them. They're not a sponsor or affiliated with us at all, and they have no idea we exist, I'm sure.
Till we tag them in the post.
That's right. But check them out. They're a great follow. Just kind of help you carry yourself in a better way, be more confident, speak properly. But they talked about some social media issues. And one of them is that people get attached to their persona. And the way that I interpreted that is when I post something, I'm posting the best of myself. And if it doesn't resonate with people, I start looking at myself as like not worthy. And I know that you've already kind of talked about this.
Yeah.
So I feel like I'm kind of going in circles, but it's that persona that we kind of live vicariously through. And the minute that you start doing things to build up that persona, I think is the point where it becomes very unhealthy because you're not being true to yourself. It's not who I am whenever I'm posting a picture of my last vacation and not posting a picture of when I got in a car wreck because I was I was driving in London and I'm on the left side of the road. Like, that's embarrassing. I don't want people to know about that. It's not a true story, but well, there is actually one when I was in New Zealand. I started to...
Please tell, you started it now.
So I was fortunate enough to go to New Zealand, and one of my work buddies and I were driving to this glowworm cave, and it was like a 2 or 3 hour drive, and we get a rental car. We're driving down the road. I'm driving on the left side. No problems. Like, it's a little weird, but it's not a problem at all. Until you get to those things that you're just not prepared for, like roundabouts.
And you're like, oh God, wrong direction.
Yeah, because I'm so used to hitting the roundabout and like turning right. Well, I start coming in. So if I'm turning right into a roundabout in
you're
the
going
States,
head on traffic.
well, if I'm in the States,
yeah.
I have to look left to make sure that I'm clear. So here I am in New Zealand in the left lane entering the roundabout, and I have to enter to the left. Well, I'm also checking to the left for traffic. So my friend's co-pilot with me, he's navigating, and I was like, what do I have to do after this intersection? He was like, how about yield?
Oh,
So I slammed on my brakes. Sure shit, man. There's a car just coming right around, and I would have creamed him, or they would have creamed me. So that was one incident, and then there was another one later on that day where a truck was in kind of like coming over our lines, and in the United States, I'm on the left side of the car, and so to the left of me is, like a 1 foot space, and that's the door, and then I'm good. There's no more car beyond that. Well, when this truck is pulling into our lane, I jerk to the left to like, get away from him, not thinking that I'm on the right side of the car and the rest of the car is over there. So I could have sworn we scraped up against the wall over to on the shoulder. I mean, like, shit was flying up off the shoulder of the road, and I heard like scrapes and crunches and stuff. And I was like, well, we'll just, I guess we chalk this up to a wreck when we turn the vehicle in. So Manny rolls down the window and looks out, and he was like astonished, the shocking look on his face. You're clear, man. What? Not a single scratch.
That's hilarious.
How did we even get here? What the hell were we talking about?
Something about being... Oh, because you made a joke or an analogy about a car wreck, but I can't remember what the point you were trying to make was.
Oh, goodness. Well, that's unfortunate. Hope the story was worth it.
Oh, it was great, dude. I mean, since we're here, I think it's so interesting on how when you're in those moments where shit's going off the rails and logical thought doesn't come out, but you have to say something. And so these sometimes fun, clever, or non-meaningful statements come out like, how about yield? And you instantly understand what they're saying because the tone or whatever else is going on. I remember riding with a friend of mine, and I can't even remember the situation, but I was so freaked out because we were about to get into a wreck, and all I could say was, dude. And he knew exactly what I was saying, and he quick slammed on his brakes and we were fine. Like, what the hell is that shit?
It's amazing. You can't get that on social media. There's no tone.
Nice way to try to bring us back.
Well, yeah, there's no tone. There's also that feeling of isolation that I think people get. We talked about the inadequacies and how that leads to depression, but the isolation that we're temporarily satisfying the box that we're checking off for, am I talking to people? Are there loved ones that care about me? Mm-hmm. It's all superficial. And I think that's kind of the theme here, is that social media creates these superficial interactions for us all.
Well, think about it this way too. It's easy to hide, right? If I'm in a room with you and I'm having a really fucked up day, you're going to see that. Despite me trying to do it, you're going to feel my energy. However, you're going to pick up on that. If I'm good and I can know how to type and fake a smile for a second while I take a picture, nobody knows I'm having a bad day. Mm-hmm. And so it eliminates those spots for us to self-correct as a community or as a species as a whole. And so I think that also adds to that isolation, because one, I can check the box and at least let people think I'm okay because I don't want to bother anybody. And then I further myself into isolation and people are like, oh, I haven't seen Tony in a while. And if you don't know, because now we have this other way and that you think you're doing your nice friend thing and you check in on them, sometimes this technology can allow for people to hide. And there's ownership on those individuals, right? Like, I've been that guy and it's on me to get out. I get that. But until recently with all this technology, that wasn't a thing. It was, I think, easier for us to self-correct as these small communities and, get around somebody when they're having a bad day, because when you're having a bad day, it's sometimes hard to like just ask for help. And so when you're around people, cool, I'm going to give you help without you asking it. Well, when our social interaction is now through a platform where people can't just see that, those things go and fester, whether they're mental problems, emotional, whatever, and become so much bigger than they would have been historically.
Because you're not getting out and engaging with somebody for them to offer assistance.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. It's a way to escape, but still feel like you're connected. But I think ultimately that feeling of connection is very temporary.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think overall it's probably a good thing, right? Because before we had that ability for people to try to just do it for us. Whereas now it sucks in the process, but I think maybe it will force us as a species to get better at saying, nope, I got to own my shit and I need help, or I need interaction, or whatever it is. In the meantime, it sucks, but I think if we make it through this, we will, but if we make it through this in a healthy way, maybe our biology will change to ask for it instead of just have it be expected. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And so because it's human nature to ask for that and be part of a community. I think that's what's made us successful as a species.
I agree.
And we're removing that. So I'll come back to a question here. We've touched a little bit on the broad reach of social media and the influence that it has. My question is, how powerful can social media get? Ooh. And if we just kind of back up a little bit, if you listen to, I believe it was like a congressional hearing with John Dorsey, who is the CEO of Twitter, their Congress or whoever the body was kind of busting his balls about how social media is handling some of the different issues with election or false posts, the spread of fake information. And John essentially said that, look, we didn't know that Twitter was going to grow to have this level of an influence that it has. And maybe he did, maybe he didn't. I think if we're honest with ourselves and he's honest with himself, he knows what his goal is, and that's to get more users using the platform, just like anybody who has a platform wants. We want more people to listen to our content,
right?
Just from the business perspective. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that Zuck and Dorsey and anybody else who's running a social media platform ever intended to control media itself, because that's what we're starting to see is that if you are silenced on social media, it's kind of like being silenced from a cable network back in the 80s and 90s. You didn't have a voice to put out into the public.
When you also think about too, does that get into an infringement of free speech?
Yes. And so that's where, I made the comment that I want to talk about government regulation. This is exactly what was on my mind.
Because sure, if there's false information, but do I have a right to say something not true? Do I have a right to express that? And I'm not trying to advocate for manipulating people or putting bad shit out there, but man, sometimes it's do you respect someone's individual journey of discovery and sharing? And sometimes, for me, I have to talk through my thought process, which is why I'm on a fucking podcast. And so if I were to be removed from my ability to talk through my thought process in the culturally accepted way, which is now social media, am I having my rights taken away? Right.
Yes. And so here's where I think it gets really tricky.
Yeah.
If you're Facebook and you own the company, it's a private business. And we all know that private businesses are treated differently than public businesses or public run entities. Mm-hmm. And I think for good reason. I think that traditionally that has been the right way to run things and differentiate the two. But now it's starting to get to the point where social media has so much influence, and it doesn't end with social media.
Right.
I think it's Apple and Microsoft as well, these major companies that have so much influence on society that in a way they're becoming more powerful than government itself. Mm-hmm. And I tend to be a pretty small government advocate. I don't want people up in my business.
Right.
But at the same time, when we've seen social media influence election results or be accused of it, regardless if true or false, it raises the question, does something need to be done about how much influence these single entities have because they can control so much information that we all have access to.
Yeah. And it's a hard conversation because, again, if we're trying to protect that freedom of speech or freedom of expression at the individual level, but then if you go at the corporate level, my intention would want to be to protect their freedom of expression and freedom of choice, however they want to run their company. You know,
I agree.
As I'm building, as we're building a podcast and I've got other companies that I'm, working and building on, I don't want someone to tell me how I can have to run that. And so, it's hard because like now they're really successful and should we punish them for that? But then, well, the effects of how they're affecting community and culture as a whole, it's just a really hard topic.
Yes. And I go back to maybe it was the FCC wanted Google to have to be responsible. No, I back up. Google, I may state something here that's not true, so I just want to be cautious of that. But I believe it was Google who wanted each of its content owners to be responsible for all of the comments that were said on their videos on YouTube. And so like if somebody posts anti-Semitic rhetoric in the comments on your YouTube video, they wanted to hold you, the content creator, responsible for that. And
it's wild.
If you extend that logic, the government has been asking, or at least raising the question, do Facebook and Google and Twitter need to be responsible for the content that's on their platform?
Oof.
And first of all, I think that it's just damn near impossible with the current technology to actually manage 1 billion users who might be commenting 20 times a day on a platform. I think that that's not a realistic ask. And so that's where you start having the question, like we saw with this past election here in the US, that Twitter, and I think Facebook did this too, I'm not very active, but but I know that I saw Twitter tagging different posts from like Donald Trump and saying, hey, this has false information in it. If you want to read more, click here. But what they're doing is setting the precedent for being publishers for their platform. They have or editors for their platform.
Or an authority for truth, right?
Yes.
So and I'm not advocating either direction, right? But whether what they're flagging is actually false or not false, they're establishing themselves as the authority. And while the intention might be good to say, hey, let's take some responsibility in here, well, now that's another whole conversation of, well, are you the authority?
You said it so much better than I did. That's exactly it. Because if somebody's posting conspiracy theory stuff and Twitter flags it as false information, we all know that some conspiracy theories are true.
Right.
Like, I'm not trying to be a nut right now, but the fact of the matter is you can go look at the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, or you can look at the Bay of Pigs and learn about these different things that were conspiracy theories at one point that turned out to be true. So if you're Twitter and you're flagging some of this as false information, you really, really have to be careful. And should they be held responsible for them saying that a statement is false, or should they be held responsible for allowing users to post false information? That's a sticky one.
It's a lot.
And we may only be at the surface of this, and that's where I was going with the question, like, how powerful can they get? We had no expectation that we would ever have 1 billion users on a platform. And then we had no expectation that Twitter could flag posts that might influence an election one way or the other, for better or for worse. And I think the jury's not here to say whether or not we've seen the end of this.
Right. We're a wind. Okay. Before social media, what was there? There was television. Before television, what was there? There was radio and like billboards and newsprint. All of that stuff was something you engaged with, and it was made to disengage with. radio programs when they started were at like for an hour. And sure, everyone looped around, the radio to listen to it for that, couple hours for the evening, but it wasn't there all day. Like there was built-in cultural disconnects, even with television, right? So we went up a level, and now we had television, but there was this big fucking heavy box in your living room, and you literally had to be there. Well, you couldn't stay there all day. You had to go to work. You had to go to school. You had to go to the grocery store to get food. There was built-in disconnects. Now, there's no disconnect. This is with me wherever I go. I use it as my GPS. I use it for people to connect with me. If I have a thought, Nick, here's a cool idea for the podcast. And there's no built-in disconnects anymore. And so that, I think, is probably the part of the core of the problem, is we don't have a way to separate ourselves.
Just for anybody who's not watching and might be listening, Tony held up a smartphone. So that's what this was.
I'm having a conversation with Nick. It just happens to be recorded.
So he's talking about the smartphone he's got everywhere he goes. And even within that very platform itself, your smartphone has notifications that will interrupt you from your interruptions. You're on Facebook being distracted from work, maybe, and then
you're on Instagram being distracted by Facebook.
Exactly. Yep. Like you'll have a notification pop up from Instagram. It's like, bam, I'm clicking onto that.
I noticed today when I'm like, shit, I'm spending too much time on social media. What do? I close Facebook and open up Reddit. Hold up.
It's just a substitute.
Hold up. Like you got it right. You closed it. And then, cool. And in my mind, it was like, social media is Facebook. Social media, too much, bad. Cool, disconnect. Next. Ah, damn it, Tony.
I think we all struggle with it. I really do. What do we do about this? Like I don't think that there is a single solution. Like
right.
I think there are a lot of opinions to consider and evaluate on how we bridge this topic moving forward. But the path that I see us on right now is that these social media platforms have a lot of influence. And I think we as a population should be educated about what that influence is. And that's where I think these documentaries like Social Dilemma help paint that picture and help us understand why I shouldn't feel bad about spending so much time on Facebook and Instagram, because they are literally engineered from a psychological perspective to get me to continue engaging. And it's this constant loop.
With next level powerful AI that has learned so much that the developers of it don't even understand it themselves anymore.
Yeah.
And so now there's almost, I say this loosely, but there's almost an entity or again, loosely, a consciousness there that's going, nope, stealing your attention. That, this is cool because it's doing way better than we ever thought. But now Frankenstein is off his leash and we don't know how to get it back.
Yeah, it feels that way, certainly. That kind of takes us straight into an AI conversation. Will AI ever take over the world? Will it get away?
I can't remember maybe it was in Social Dilemma that he was talking about it. Everyone talks about how, the point where where artificial intelligence overtakes humanity's strength, but nobody talks about when artificial intelligence overtakes humanity's weakness. And so
what do you mean by that?
And so it's easy to think that artificial intelligence could be so strong to overcome us at our strongest. And we depict that in movies with like machines making themselves and literally killing and physically overpowering us. What we don't talk about is artificial intelligence exploiting the weaknesses in our mindset, like this psychology stuff we've been talking about for the last hour.
Yeah.
That's already happening. And we're not really, we're talking about it now, but seeing that was this holy shit. And then, there was the arc of this is where it starts. And then at some point it continues and overtakes humanity's strength. It's like, damn.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting dilemma. And you're right, it's definitely something that I've never considered. And like when we see some of those science fiction movies, iRobot comes to mind. Mm-hmm. It's when humanity is so far advanced technologically that they're in control of everything no matter what is what it comes across as. Even though the AI breaks out and goes rogue, we're able to rein it back in.
Or, you know, taking the example of the algorithm that they're like, we don't really understand it anymore. Take that and fast forward 20, 30, 40, 100 years. And now this AI isn't just in a server, but it's in a movable, let's just say for, you know, discussion's sake, humanoid form walking around like in all these movies we see. And that AI learns and goes, well, I have a core need to preserve humanity. And now humanity, like we do stupid shit. Oh, they're just hurting themselves. I need to stop them from themselves. And then you get into these weird things. It's like, damn. I don't even know, man. Like, it's just.
So have you found anything that gives you peace?
Meditation.
Meditation. So I think the ideal solution consists of some balance here, just as most solutions do. But I think that for us to continue to get all of the benefits and value that social media does provide, we have to find a way to be able to have access to it, but for it to not be in our faces all the time.
Yeah.
And I'll say that the last iOS update that just came out a month ago or so introduced an app drawer similar to how Android phones are. So if there are any Android users out there, you know that.
Nah, you do you.
I was an Android user for a long, long time. I definitely think there are pros and cons. But on the Android side of things, you have your home screen just like an iPhone, except you have the ability to have a blank home screen. It could be just a background. All your apps are in a separate part of your phone in what's called an app drawer. And the nice thing about that is whenever you flip open your phone, if you don't want Facebook to be on your home page or to be on one of your home pages, if you're just scrolling from left to right, then it doesn't have to be there. It can be tucked away, out of sight, out of mind. And the iOS update recently did that they added an app drawer. And so the first thing I did was I was like, great, I can keep Instagram on here. And when Tony tells me we got a message in our Instagram account, I go look. Sure, would it be nice to have notifications turned on for my business account, but not for my personal? Yeah, maybe I can do that. We'll see. But right now, like all notifications, I don't want to hear anything come from social media. It's just, I don't have enough self-control.
Yeah.
And I get sucked in. So that's been, in my mind, a step in the right direction because it allows you to have access to it, but control how much attention it takes up.
Yeah, I noticed, like I mentioned earlier, when I took and removed the notifications off of it, it was good, but yet now I've built my habit to go, well, I need to check because there's no little red little bubble in the top right corner telling me if I got anything and I need to know.
Isn't that great?
Well, no, but I need let me go check. And so I feel like I'm almost on there more. So now I'm checking even when there's not any notifications to see if there is. And it's like, bro, you're trying, but you don't have it figured out yet.
Sure. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I absolutely love not getting any notifications. It's so peaceful for me. It may be a little bit selfish because if somebody tries to contact me through a page, well, I might not see it for 2 or 3 days.
But that's healthy, I think, because again, I don't think we're designed to have deep, close, intertwined relationships with hundreds or even thousands of people. Like I mentioned it earlier, defining the difference between like your tight circle, your close friends, your acquaintances. Some people might be good at that, but I don't think culturally we're good at that anymore because, well, all of my acquaintances are my friends and I need to keep up with everybody. Oh, who's your circle? Well, if your social media people should be, in my opinion, your outer circle. You don't need to keep up with everybody every day. You might not need to keep up with everybody every week.
Sure. Oh, absolutely.
You know, like, dude, you're in my tight circle of people and we don't even talk every day. So why should you have to talk to or interact with your huge circle every day?
Right.
You know, so there's been days as I've been busy building this or, you know, other things or, you know, day job or trying to go on some of these cool hikes that I go on. There's 2-3 days. I don't even check. You know, I put my post up for the day and then I move along and I come back 2 days later and I get to go through all the engagements and respond to people. And it's, oh, this is actually more satisfying to me seeing it all at once and going, wow, what a great response. This was a good post. Let me make another one like this.
Right.
Instead of getting the little bits as a trickle and not actually being satisfied. So I think you can be more satisfied with social media and the engagement that it can bring if you build in your own disconnect.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to think about it. And I'd say that I had the same experience. I just haven't ever really been in the mindset to evaluate it the way that you did. But you're absolutely right. Like I'll jump on and I've got, you know, 8 or 9 different threads and I can go on and I'm like, yeah, I like these ideas and now I can actually, I'm checking them when I've actually got time that I've set aside intentionally, not scheduled,
Right.
but I'm, you know, sitting on the couch not doing anything. It's like, great, this is a time that I can actually engage with you in the conversation. And it might be a day later and I'm sorry, but I can actually put my real thoughts and energy and effort into my responses because it's time that I'm not stealing from somewhere else.
Well, and I think that makes for better, it re-establishes these platforms as the good communication centers that they were designed to be. Because I noticed myself, like even getting better about you were there the night when I took my Apple Watch off and I'm like, I'm sitting here having a conversation with you and people are blowing me up. And I'm like, fuck all this. I'll talk to you later. Like I took the thing off and I went and sold it within a week.
Did you?
Yeah.
I didn't know you sold it.
I was like, no, I've not put it back on since. That was months ago. But then even since then, I've taken it a step further because, oh, someone texted me. Oh, I need to, hold up. It's saying that whoever, not knowing who they are, whoever potentially just reached out to me might be more important than the person I'm sitting in the fucking room with.
Bro, I was at the dentist today getting a cavity filled.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there and my phone is buzzing in my pocket. Buzz, 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 buzz. And then I get a phone call and I dead ass stuck my hand in my pocket while the dentist has a drill in my mouth. And I was like, what the hell am I doing right now? Like,
Yeah.
I just put my hand out of my pocket and I was like, just keep buzzing, baby. Just keep buzzing. Still have no idea who called.
Well, but it's, what I was getting at is that if we want to get back to that point where we actually experience community and meaningful relationships as humans again, we can do that through social media, but it has to be with intentionality. And so I think when you're in the moment with we're sitting here, it's easy to be intentional because we're recording and trying to make content. But when you're sitting at home, are you distracted? Are you in your own time with your thoughts? Are you making dinner? Are you kind of trying to watch TV? No. Let me check my phone calls. Let me check my emails. Let me be intentional and put my time and energy into this, whether that be social media or whatever. I think it'll be a lot easier to get a lot more of that fulfillment out of it because you're putting intentionality into it. Instead of, oh, got a notification, got to check it. And you have your half energy that's half right there, half whatever you were doing. And now it's this weird split thing and you're not fulfilled in any realm.
So what I'm hearing, Tony, is that you're saying don't half-ass it, use full ass.
Yes, full ass that shit.
That's right. We need more full ass stuff. Well, Tony, anything else that comes to mind on the social media front?
No, we need to end it on full ass that shit.
We just got to full ass that shit. Hey, I'll leave one other quick tip that's, I think somewhat realistic for people to do. I've found it helpful to just rearrange my phone screen from time to time. So, I don't know, every couple months.
Like
maybe more,
they
maybe
do in
less.
the grocery store, so you take a different path and buy new shit.
Yes, yes, except kind of the inverse result. But yeah, if you subconsciously get to the point where you flip open your phone screen, I flip open my phone screen. Let me speak for myself and not you guys. But I flip open my phone screen and my thumb is like going to where Instagram is. And it's like I wasn't even looking at it or thinking about it. But once you rearrange it, just move it a row over. It completely changes that. It's just like such a good reset. Do more than a row over, so it's not like right where you're
But
looking.
it gives you a moment to have a conscious thought about it instead
Yes.
of it being reactive and instinctive. I like that.
Yep. Very simple. You can still be addicted to social media all you want, but it's just an easy way to be conscious of it, like you said.
Awesome.
So, hey, appreciate everybody listening in, and don't forget to follow us on social media.
Hey, catch you guys next week.